Hey, power people. Welcome to Renewable Rides, powered by VECKTA. I'm Gareth Evans, the CEO and founder.
And I'm Dan Roberts, head of sales. In each episode, we'll uncover the latest trends, learnings, challenges, and triumphs relating to the energy transition, on-site energy, and sustainability through the experiences of our inspiring guests and team here at VECKTA.
So get ready for an exhilarating adventure into the fast-paced world of challenging limits, adapting purposefully, and empowering co-creation to accelerate the energy transition with those that are on a mission to create a more resilient, profitable, sustainable, and thriving energy future. So let's go.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Renewable Rides. Gareth and I are super excited today to have a really awesome guest, arguably one of the original drivers of the entire solar movement, Steve Heckeroth, and founder and now Chief Innovation Officer of Solectrac, which is one of the leading electric tractor providers for the agriculture industry. But that is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Steve and all the things he's done over the past 50 plus years in the solar and the clean energy industry. So with that, Steve, super excited to have you. We always like to start off with learning a little bit about what you're passionate about, both on a personal level and professionally. And I know that there's a lot to you, so I'm excited to dig into it. But yeah, maybe you can share a little bit about your passions.
Well, my passion started, I guess, my parents took us camping like at least once a month, and we went to all the national parks in the western U.S. and most of the state parks and a lot of county parks as well. And in the desert, the mountains, up in the redwoods, and like Zion and Yellowstone and all over. And I just had this great love of the natural environment, and really a dislike of anything that destroyed the natural environment. And I grew up in LA and was confronted with terrible air pollution. And so as I grew up and, running track and cross country and having my lungs destroyed, it became really clear to me that fossil fuels were a big part of the problem. So when the oil spill in '69 in Santa Barbara was kind of the turning point, and I helped to organize the first Earth Day in 1970, and that's when I kind of dedicated my life to finding alternatives to burning fossil fuel. And that's what I've been doing ever since. I was going to school at ASU, studying architecture. I got my degree in architecture. I went right up to my favorite spot in the world, Mendocino Coast. Yeah, and I know, Dan, you're from a little bit inland from there, but I had to be near the ocean because I've always been connected to the ocean. So I went as close to the ocean as I could find property. And, you wouldn't believe, we found 4 acres, south slope on Navarre Ridge, and we paid $8,000.
That's amazing.
in 1969, 70. And so I finished school and then went up there and started practicing architecture, building furniture for a while to support my passion, which was really to come up with a way to build buildings that actually created more energy than they used. And over a 25-year period of doing nothing but passive solar design, I was able to build one of the first Energy Plus homes. And it was a bermed house, totally exposed to the sun. It didn't require any heating all year long. And it was right on the ocean. So it was it won quite a few awards, and actually that's how I met my second wife. Is she was the editor in the local paper, the Mendocino Beacon,
Yes.
and they said that she should go out and do an article on this guy who built this solar house, and rest is history. so, so that's a start. Yeah, my passion is finding alternatives to burning fossil fuel, and in transportation, in architecture, in electric tractors, and all those things. So
That's incredible. Steve, take us back to then your the childhood, and what, in terms of the camping and the experiences, what do you think that did for you then, and sort of what's carried through to now? What are the big kind of learnings and takeaways people should be thinking about as they bring up their families?
well, I can still remember going up to the Redwood State Park in Mendocino, and it might have been on the Humboldt too. I mean, there's several of them up there, but I remember sitting in this meadow surrounded by redwood trees and thinking, this is where I want to live. And just thinking, here's these 2,000-year-old trees and this beautiful meadow that was a low-lying area. So I guess the trees didn't like it, but it was a natural meadow surrounded by redwood trees. And I thought, what could be more perfect, And then as we were driving back and forth, I'd see these areas that had been clear cut, and doing, even as a pretty young kid, I was devastated by that people could actually destroy an a tree that had lived for 2,000 years just without even thinking about it. Just cut it down, and I found even back in the 60s, over 90% of the redwoods had been harvested and sent down to a lot of them from Navarro Ridge, where our place is. They just clear cut the whole area, hauled them out with oxen, and then in the winter they would make a mudslide down into the river, and they'd float out, and there was a mill at the mouth of every river all the way up and down the Mendocino and Humboldt coast. And the trees from Navarro Ridge went down to San Diego to build the pier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And some of them, I guess, went to San Francisco to build railroad ties and stuff like that. But I just thought there's got to be a better way, and so my whole life I've been trying to figure out better ways to do things that do not destroy the environment that we need to live.
Yeah.
And I found out about climate change in the 70s, and that seemed to me like the ultimate challenge was to both try to stop using fossil fuel and come up with alternatives that could give people the same convenience and actually improve their life. Fossil fuels have done nothing but make our lives less connected. And I think that's if I had to think of anything that would improve our lives, it would be improving the connection with the earth. And
Steve,
understanding that circle of life that has to happen, and it has to happen in a short circle. It can't be one of those long, where you get the fossil fuel from tar sands and they melt it down with fracked natural gas and they ship it in a pipeline to Texas or something, and it's refined, and then they have to distribute it all over. Every one of those processes has a huge um, greenhouse gas effect. And by the time it gets to your vehicle, like a tractor or a car, um, there's been so much damage done that nobody even thinks about it. But that's where most of the damage happens, is in that extraction process, and that those other processes that they're taking it up to 800 degrees to crack it into all these fuels. And they're just producing CO2 all the way along the process, and methane. When they're doing fracking, they leave the wells open, and the methane just comes out, and it's 20 times more potent than CO2 as a greenhouse gas. So to understand the connection with the earth and what we have to do to get back to a place where we know that future generations are going to have the same ability to sit in that field surrounded by redwoods, you know, that, and have experience all those things that we are fortunate enough to still experience, but they're rapidly disappearing with mainly with our choice to choose convenience. And it's not even really convenience, it's just the power that is given to corporations that can easily extract a resource and then market it to everybody so that they think that it's more convenient, even though it's choking them to death.
How do you personally still stay connected? What's your approach to staying connected to nature?
Well, I've got a homestead up on the Mendocino coast that is my place where I stay connected. And everywhere I live, we have a garden, and I ride bikes as much as possible. That's my favorite form of transportation. It's so much more efficient. I've written articles on transportation and how to make it more efficient, and it's getting back to community scale and making communities work, both providing food and providing employment, providing schools, and all close enough so you don't need to get in a car, you know?
Yeah.
So and it's not that hard. There's a place, Village Homes, in Davis, where Michael, well, I can't remember his last name, but I met him a few times, and he created a community where everybody had a garden. There was buildings set aside for schools, buildings set aside for work. And like we experienced in the pandemic, you can work from anywhere. Why not work from close to home? It's just insane the path that we've taken. And if you can do all that in a community, then you grow the food, you consume the food, the waste, products from growing food turn into compost, and it goes back into the land. In nature, there's no such thing as waste. It's a word we had to make because we were creating things that couldn't be absorbed by nature. But in nature, everything is absorbed and it's reused, it's recycled. And so we got to create those communities that can enclose those nutrient cycles in a small circle, rather than, we talk about the 3,000 mile salad. In New York right now, they're eating salads that are grown in California or Mexico.
Yeah.
And that doesn't need to be. I've got a greenhouse that I built for very little money that you can grow salad all year long. My daughter grows arugula for all the restaurants on the Mendocino coast,
Wow.
on our homestead. And you can grow that 9 months out of the year outside. And if you want to grow it during the winter, you can grow it during the winter too, just with a greenhouse. So it's what I've been doing is trying to go through and make everything possible in a natural environment so we don't have to depend on fossil fuel. And I've accomplished that in architecture. I've built energy. I wrote a little manual on how to do it, and I've built energy plus homes. That's homes that create more energy than they use. Which first you've got to focus on the heating and the cooling, which is really easy to do with passive solar design and earth connection and all those things that are listed in that manual I wrote. And then like the frosting on the cake is like the solar water heater and the PV panels.
Mm-hmm.
And you get your energy use down to where it's so minimal, it's just a small solar array, and then the rest of the house can have a green roof. So you're not destroying any of the land. The whole thing that it allows us to exist is our interaction with plants. In architecture, or agriculture right now produces 11 or 12% of the greenhouse gas emissions. And that's because it's totally reliant on fossil fuel for fertilizers, for the equipment, for hauling all the food thousands of miles, back and forth. And the nutrient cycle is broken every step of the way because they till the land so deeply and that they release all the carbon that's stored in the land. And the land is bare for a lot of the year. And so no plants are growing. But in agriculture before fossil fuel, it actually lowered the temperature of the globe.
Mm.
If you look at that last slide in that thing I sent you, 12,000 years ago, we were coming out of an ice age, and the global temperature was rising at almost a vertical angle. And agriculture started 12,000 years ago. And you see when agriculture started, global temperature started leveling off because plants were being planted all over the world, more than even the natural environment was providing, because people needed food. And agriculture is what allowed people to stay in one place. It allowed civilization to start, and it also modified the temperature of the earth. And you can see right up to the Industrial Revolution, the temperature leveled off, and then it started decreasing just slightly as more and more agriculture happened all over the world, because they weren't doing the deep tillage and the chemical fertilizers and everything. They were doing all natural processes in sync with nature. So they were able to grow food and sequester carbon and create oxygen all at the same time. And so as soon as we went to fossil fuel, that connection with the earth and the natural systems was cut, because we started using fossil fuel in all these ways that destroy natural systems
Yeah.
and give us the ability to really, really rape the earth in just the most horrific ways you can think of. And that's where we've got in this huge mess now, that the answers are so simple. They're staring us in the face. All we got to do is get back to a natural system and live in that natural system as part of an environment instead of separate from it.
Yeah. Steve, what you shared there resonates. In many ways. I mean, what we are really focused on is helping um, businesses deploy distributed energy resources or local energy. A lot of what you just talked about is kind of the locality and not separating things by
Exactly.
distant
Yeah.
geographies. Um, the podcast is called Renewable Rides. You've been on this ride for many decades, dating back to the mid late '60s. Tell us about what you've seen in the evolution of solar in the package that you sent us, and we can put that in the show notes. Many pictures of kind of early wind turbines as well. So talk to us a little bit about the solar industry back in the early '70s and all the things that you've seen over the past 50 plus years.
Well, photovoltaics, when I first started, they were like $100 a watt. So it wasn't something that was available to everybody. But solar water heating, goes back. There's some places in the world where everybody has a solar water heater on their roof, and most of them are like thermal siphon or convection loops. And I did so back. I started this company called Homestead Enterprises back in 1973, and it was to develop and sell renewable energy products. And I guess that the story of Homestead Enterprises would be the story you're talking about, because I went out and everything that I thought I needed for my homestead, I went out and became a distributor for it. so I got I made at first I made my own solar panels, my own solar hot water heaters. I just got copper pipe and and tees and welded verticals, and I put it on a metal, black painted metal sheet, and then I put a sheet of glass over it. And that's solar hot water heater is still on our water tower, and there's still one on our barn that provides we have three places. We have a guest house and a barn loft, and then the tower house is where the whole family was brought up. And now my oldest daughter lives there. My second youngest daughter lives in the guest house, and my oldest grandson lives in the barn loft. But all the kids went through, all of those places. They would grow out of the tower, where only had like 2 bedrooms, and we expanded it to 3. And then they would, as they got older, they'd move up into the barn loft. And early on, the barn loft was a Montessori school. So when they were all young, they went to school right on the land, and we had kids from the ridge come to that school too. So I guess it's not just a story of the development of renewable energy and stuff like that, but it's a story of trying to figure out ways to stay closely connected to the land. And we grew all our own food all through those years, and we still do up there. So it's a story of trying to figure out how to use the energy that comes up every morning to power everything we need. And it's so simple. I don't know why everybody doesn't have a solar hot water heater. I mean, at one point, PG&E was said that if you put in this, we'll give you $750 for putting in a for switching from an electric hot water heater or a gas hot water heater to a solar water heater. That was in I think it was in 76 or something. And I didn't have didn't have electric hookup, so I couldn't take advantage of that. So what I did was I said, okay, hook me up. And and they gave us a 100 amp service, and I made the solar hot water heater, and it qualified for the $750 rebate, and the $750 paid our electric bill for about 4 years.
I was gonna ask, yeah, does that mean that you've only been paid by PG&E through the years?
That was what happened. They paid our electric bill and when you get something that you're not used to, you start using it, So we eventually started using more and more electricity, and then when we could afford photovoltaics in the early 90s, we put up a photovoltaic array. Before that, we had a wind generator. You guys would love it. When I was going to school in Arizona, I lived in a VW bus.
Nice.
And we moved up to the land, and we lived in a teepee and the VW bus. And then we built our tower house, and it was gravity feed. Wind pumps were one of the first things that Homestead Enterprises did. I did water towers. I built about 20 water towers, and I put in aero motor wind pumps. They call them windmills.
Yep.
But the multi-blade windmills, that was one of the few renewable energy devices that was available at the time. Photovoltaics weren't available. Even solar hot water was mostly, you had to import it from like Israel or someplace, because nobody was making them in the US. And then Wendy Dankoff came up with this solar pump, and Tom Conlon came up with the aero power wind generator. So we put a 1 kilowatt wind generator up on our tower, and that gave us electricity, and it was all 12 volt. We took the radio out of the VW bus, and we put it in our living room, and we had good nice 12 volt speakers for car stereo speakers, so we had great sound in our tower house. But we were 12 volts for about 5 years, I guess. And then when we got the money from PG&E, we switched over to 110 and started doing more 110 stuff. And just as every new thing came along, I tried to incorporate it into Homestead Enterprises and what we were doing. So we started out with water towers and wind pumps, and then we went to I got grain mills, so we could make our own flour.
Wow.
Grow our own wheat and make our own flour. And I was a distributor for these really high-end grain mills. They were hand powered, and they had a belt on them, so I started powering with an electric motor too. And then I made a pedal powered grain mill, and pedal powered juicer and hooked it to a piece of furniture. So, and I made a pedal powered demonstration unit for the schools where you would have an incandescent light bulb, a fluorescent light bulb, and eventually LEDs. They weren't available yet, but you'd get on that pedal. It had a little generator that the bicycle. I hooked the generator to a bicycle, and then I made this panel with all these lights and different things on it. Like one of the things was a coffee heater. You know it's just a little element that you put in a cup, and it would heat the water, so you could make coffee. Well, that and then I had the class. I took it to the high school class and had all the kids pedal on it. And like the biggest guy, macho guy would I'd say, okay, we'll do the incandescent light, and he'd be pedaling away, sweating, and 100 watt light bulb, you barely get it going. I said, well, let's try the coffee warmer. And he would be trying as hard as he could, and he couldn't do it. He couldn't really keep it going to heat the coffee. And I said, some petite little girl would get on the bicycle, and I'd put on the fluorescent light, 100-watt fluorescent, and she'd pedal away, and everybody was like, "Oh my God, how did she do that?" Because it was just showing them that with their own bodies they could do things. And some of the pedal things we did, like Soulfest, we'd power the stage with pedals. We had a 10-station pedal generator, and that would power the whole stage, all the amps on the whole stage.
Wow.
And people would take turns getting on that I think it was 10 or 12 seats with pedals, and they'd all were connected to this big generator.
I love that.
And people would wait in line to get on there and pedal. And they'd dance for a while, and then they'd pedal for a while.
And your music.
And it was a great fun thing, and that and then we had the solar stages, as soon as photovoltaics were ready. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but
great stories.
I'm 75 years old, and I've had like 5 careers, and I just have so much I want to share that I think could make the world such a better place. But I really want to talk about what I'm doing now.
Yeah, I was gonna have you switch gears and maybe get us up to speed on the latest venture.
Yeah, well, I was doing architecture, and I got to the point where I could build a zero energy home, and I thought, well, I've done that. Now what's next? And right then, it was 1990, and something called the Zero Emission Mandate came out. It was where the air, what are they called? CARB, California Air Resources Board, came up with a plan because there was just too much pollution, and there wasn't enough. Like now we have catalytic converters and all these filters, and like the type, the Tier 4 diesels have so much emission control on them that they're less efficient than like a 1950s tractor.
All right.
They produce more greenhouse gas emissions, but they don't produce particulates. So they've just shot themselves in the foot. They're they're getting money to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but they're worried about the particulates because that's what's killing people. So they're focusing on that. But anyway, in 1990, the zero emission mandate got me all excited because by 1998, the zero emission mandate said that 2% of the new cars sold in California had to be zero emission. And at the time, that meant electric
Mm.
because there was nothing else. And all there was at that time was lead acid batteries.
Yeah.
There wasn't any, nickel metal hydride came along, like 10 years later. So I started building electric cars, and my goal was to build, really small electric cars. I wanted to do 3 wheels, and I did electric bikes too at the time. I built there's so many. Like I skip from time to time, and it's hard to keep my thinking linear, because I go. But back to the zero emission mandate. So I started out doing conversions. And at that time, everybody thought the Fiero was like, a little sports car. It was going to be a good car to convert. So I got a old Fiero and found out right away that it was not, because under the fiberglass shell, there was a complete metal chassis.
Mm.
So it weighed like 3,500 pounds.
Oh, gee.
And it was just this little sports car. So I figured out right away that if you were going to have a long range vehicle, you had to start out with the lightest vehicle possible. And I started working, I found these Type 3 Carmanghias, which were pretty light. They were less than 2,000 pounds. That was still a lot. But if you put like, I think I put about 1,400 pounds of lead acid batteries in those Carmanghias. And the Type 3 Carmanghia, I don't know if you know that it's kind of looks like a Corvair. It's not the Type 1 Carmanghia was rounded, and you couldn't get enough batteries in a Type 1 Carmanghia. But the Type 3 had a lot of space for batteries. So I put them in the front, in the middle, in the back. And, because the electric motor was so small, you could fill up the engine compartment with batteries. So I could balance the weight of the vehicle front and back. And the Type 3, the interesting thing about it was there was a Type 3 variant wagon. This VW, do you remember the VWs? Yeah. There was a square back and a notch back, and then a station wagon.
Mm-hmm.
And the station wagon had a Type 3 wheels, and it had disc brakes. It was the first VW to have disc brakes on the front, and it was made in the 70s. The Type 3 Carmanghia was made in the 60s through the early 70s. So nobody liked these station wagons, these Type 3 variants. So I was able to get a bunch of those. And I took the rear ends. They had, rather than the swing axle, they had, the wheels would stay level because they had 2 points of movement in the axle. And they were much heavier duty. They could carry a lot more weight. So I went around, I talked to VW experts. I said, can I put one of these Type 3 station wagon rear ends and front ends in a Type 3 Carmanghia? And they go, what Type 3 Carmanghia? And they said, I don't think any of those exist. They were they were never imported and sold in the U.S., but there was a lot of servicemen that brought them back because they were like the Porsche of VW.
Mm.
They had brass under the chrome. They were, they sold for $3,000 when the Type 1 Carmanghia sold for $1,500 or $15,000. So it was a time when $1,500. Yeah, that's what you could buy a Carmanghia back.
Nice.
So they were twice as expensive as the normal Carmanghia. And so they were worth restoring. That was the main thing about the electric vehicle industry in the beginning, is you wanted to get a car that was worth restoring, because that was as hard as the conversion, restoring an old car.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody could afford a new car to electrify, so everybody got old cars. And this whole industry started up. There was new motor companies, new controller companies coming out every day, battery companies, and there's just this whole development thing that was going on. So from like 1990 to 1994 was kind of my evolution of the electric vehicle. And I ended up with this electric Porsche Spyder replica kit.
No way.
Because it was the lightest vehicle I could find. It weighed less than 1,000 pounds without the engine and the gas tank. And then I put 1,400 pounds of lead in it. and it had a 125-mile range. It went 0 to 60 in 8 seconds. It beat the EV1.
Wow.
And it won every race it was ever in. There was a couple of people that bought them to race them. And I only sold 5 of those, because in 1995, the California Manufacturers Association and the Western States Petroleum Association put $60 million in a fund to defeat the mandate.
Oh, wow.
And they started a negative advertising campaign. I was on the Mendocino County Planning Commission at the time. Every 2 weeks, I'd receive a packet, a yellow envelope, and you'd pull out all these articles. They look like they were from reputable magazines and newspaper clippings, and it was like, teachers against electric vehicles and scientists against, and if you were a first responder, they sent them all to the fire departments, the police departments, and they said if you were a first responder to a accident with an electric vehicle, you would be electrocuted and die.
Wow.
And it was such a good advertising campaign. The Health and Harmony Festival in Santa Rosa, I went there in '94 with the Porsche, little electric. It was the one James Dean made famous, the RSK 55, and everybody just loved it. And I got 10 orders and even a couple deposits. And with that, I was buying them one at a time, and they cost me $10,000. Was that right? Yeah, $10,000 for the replica kit. And then I bought 10 of them, and they were $3,000 a piece.
Wow.
And I thought, I'm going to go into business, because I can make this thing for under 30,000. And at that time, electric cars were really expensive. So I thought I was going into business. Well, that ad campaign. See, the auto industry figured it takes 3 years to develop a new product. So if we're gonna, by 1998, we need to sell 2% electric vehicles. So we've either got to defeat it or we've got to start building these things. And they decided, let's do everything we can to defeat it. And that's what they did. They put all this money. I mean, it was probably like two minutes of their profit, $60 million. Oil companies, are you kidding? That was nothing. But it had the effect that I went back to the same Health and Harmony Festival the next year. The only people that came up to me said I was a bad person for driving an electric vehicle.
Mm.
That's what $60 million of negative advertising can do.
Well, they all died
That was
away in case they got electrified.
Yeah, that was my first introduction to what the evil of corporations.
Mm.
And so I went from there to tractors because I didn't think they had quite as big of a lobby as the auto industry, and maybe the oil companies wouldn't see me for a while. But I was building these poor spiders with 1,400 pounds of lead in them. And I was looking at this is stupid, you know. And then I went to the county fair, and here's this big cement block on the back of a tractor with a forklift on the front.
Mm.
I said,
They
electric
need the weight.
tractors, that's the
Yeah.
way to
Yeah.
go. They need weight. They're the
Lead
best,
counterweight.
yeah, they're the best possible electric vehicle. And I went down to one of the tractor places, and you can get 80-pound weights to put on the front bumper of a tractor because you need to balance the weight of the implement on the back. And they have special bumpers, and they have these special 80-pound weights, and you put like 8 or 10 of them on the front bumper to balance the weight on the back. And those 80-pound, at the time, those 80-pound weights cost $80. And at the time, I was buying golf cart batteries that weighed 80 pounds and cost $80.
Wow.
And so I could get my energy source for the same price as a bunch of dead weight and do the same thing. So I thought, this is it. And so I switched after I got, the bad experience from Health and Harmony, where people were like, God, how can you drive an electric vehicle? That's so bad. You're going to kill people.
Mm-hmm.
And still I talk to firemen who think that electric cars are really more dangerous than gas cars. I've got this article from the government that says there's 100 times more fires in from combustion engines than there are from electric batteries. And if you use lithium iron phosphate, LFPs, they don't burn.
Yeah.
That's what I use in the tractors. So you can eliminate that whole argument. And there's a bunch of, that they keep putting out new arguments against electric vehicles. The fossil fuel industry is just like, they feed them to these guys who are willing to interest, who are in the industry or something. My son's wife was brought up in Wyoming, and they went back for a reunion. And Wyoming is like Halliburton and everything.
Mm.
And my son was getting into these heated discussions, but fortunately he knew the truth, and he eventually could just talk to these guys and say, well, here's the science. Here's what, they say, well, the pollution caused by mining lithium, and he would say, well, like in Australia, they mine like half the lithium, and they only produce 1% of the petroleum, but petroleum is the biggest pollution source in Australia. So if you look at the science and you actually crunch the numbers, fossil fuel is so much worse than we could ever do with lithium mining. And they're coming up with, and lithium's recyclable.
Yeah.
You burn fossil fuel, that's it.
Yeah.
Would that be, because I was going to ask that question before, Steve, I think in terms of your very circular thinking and reusing, and I was going to ask about the mining industry, because a lot of people say obviously a mining transition is necessary for an energy transition. Like, what are your thoughts around that? And then I'd love to hear about your tractor and who you sell to.
Yeah, no, if you look at the facts, fracking and just pumping pumping oil out of the ground, which is less and less possible because we've pumped most of it in the US anyway. Just pumping it out of the ground uses enough energy to power, I think it's 19 million electric cars.
Wow.
So, and then if you go start looking at offshore oil rigs, and there's thousands of those out there, they're all powered by diesel generators. And they consume tons of diesel fuel, each one of those rigs. And they regularly have blowouts that pollute the ocean. So you take the whole fossil fuel infrastructure, starting from, you know, the mine, where they're the tar sands, or the what they're doing up in North Dakota now with their just mining the oil rich bitumen. And then there's so many processes that they have to do to that stuff to get it into a fuel that you can burn. It's just like they're drilling now in the salt flats, and they're not destroying the surface. They're drilling and pumping out this brine that all they have to do is dry it and then take the lithium out of it. So it's a very, by comparison to the whole fossil fuel thing, it's just so minor, but yet it's blown up by the fossil fuel industry to make everybody think that, oh, we're just trading one thing for another. It's going to be just as bad. But the fact that batteries are recyclable gives me the hope that, you know, it's going to be something that are, you know, when we're through with our car, it'll just be remade into the next generation, and eventually we'll have enough, like lead now. You know, 99% of the lead is recycled because it's valuable.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be a huge problem. I mean, that's what some people think the fall of Rome was caused by the lead cups they drank out of. The pewter stuff. It has lead in it, and you know, it doesn't do good things to your brain. So lead is a much bigger problem than lithium, and they've figured out how to totally recycle it now. You pay a core charge, you have to return your old lead acid battery, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that they all talk about the battery being so bad, but there's a battery in every car, you know, and that lead acid battery is probably more environmentally damaging unless it's handled correctly than a lithium battery. So
you use lithium on your current tractors.
Yes.
What are the tractors designed for? Who do you sell to? What's going on with the business today?
LFP. So when I switched well, actually I built the first one in 92, the first electric tractor, agricultural electric tractor. It was a conversion of a Yanmar tractor. And then I did a whole bunch of conversions for different individuals who wanted to get off of fossil fuel, and had, so, you know, the initial solar arrays and stuff. You know, the whole solar PV industry started in Mendocino, Humboldt.
Did
you know that?
No.
Yeah.
I don't think I realized that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was because of the pot industry. They needed energy to pump water, and they couldn't get a hookup to PG&E because they would find out, you know, they would come out to check or something. And so the whole solar industry started mostly up in Humboldt. A guy named David Katz he had alternatives energy, something like that, a company up in Humboldt. And so back to the tractor. So then I got a commission from Ford New Holland. One of the biggest tractor companies. Is an old guy that was retiring, and he wanted to do something good and interesting before he retired. So he called me out. He looked all over for somebody that was building an electric tractor. I was the only guy in the world he found.
Wow.
And so he called me up. He said, "I want you to build an electric tractor for Ford New Holland." I go, "Wow, all right, I've arrived," and so I said, "Well, what can you send me? And I'll convert it." And I said it needs to be a geared transmission because hydrostatic drives have to run all the time, and they're about half as efficient as gears. And he says, "All we've got is hydrostatic drives." So I said, "Okay, I'll get a Yanmar." I was buying container loads of Yanmars, the gray market, because in Japan, if something's got rust on it, you can't use it anymore. It goes into the gray market.
Wow.
And so there was a lot of them with blown engines. Perfect. Give them to me. I'll take the engine out and put in an electric motor. And so that's what I did. I loaded it with batteries in all the right places, and I made a fiberglass hood for it, and I put hydraulic pumps on, and that was the noisiest part of it. That's what I hated the most, was the hydraulic pump, because the 3-point hitch required hydraulics. And then so I finished it, sent it off, and they did a few more modifications. They put another hydraulic pump for the power steering. It had manual steering, and they wanted to put power steering on it. So then now it's got 2 hydraulic pumps running, and it lowered the run time, but that's okay. So they flew us out to New Holland, Pennsylvania, my wife and I. At first, they flew the tractor out. I couldn't believe it. What? They wanted it right away. And so they got the tractor out, and then they flew us out, and we got to tour Amish country. It was a great vacation, and they brought out all the engineers, and they were all really skeptical. We thought, "Oh, this is it's like a golf cart or something, it's not gonna do anything." And what they didn't realize was that electric motors have maximum torque at 0 RPM. I mean, that's a hard concept to think of. 0 RPM maximum torque. So that's why a Tesla beats everything, because right off the line, you've got maximum torque.
Mm-hmm.
And so they took us out to their test site. They had me drive it out they were all like, "I don't want to get on that thing." So they took me out to the test site, and they said it was down a hill, and there was a really steep bank off to the side of the road going down the hill. And they said, "Why don't you drive it down that hill and come back up?" And they were all joking with each other. "This is going to be good, And so I drove it down, turned around, came back up, and they all looked at each other like, "Oh my God, I don't think a diesel could do that." Because it was like a 45-degree angle, and it had enough weight on it that
Traction.
it could do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, traction, and it just went right up that hill, like no problem. And so, we looked at each other and said, "I guess we have to test this thing." And so we went out and we mowed a half acre, put a mower on the back, and then it had a front loader on it, and we shoveled gravel for a while, and they were going, "Wow, this is really cool."
How long would it run for?
What's that?
How long would it run for?
Well, it did a half acre. It ran for probably 4 hours. We were
Oh, wow.
testing it, and it was pretty dead by then, but they were still impressed, you know.
Yeah.
I think what I've done since then with tractors is I've used linear actuators for the 3-point hitch. A linear actuator can lift 2,000 pounds with 6 amps.
Whoa, what?
Takes a 4 horsepower motor hydraulic pump to do the same thing.
Hmm.
So electric just blows everything away, especially when you completely ground up electrified. That's why Tesla is so far ahead, because the rest of the industry was trying to do conversions.
Mm.
And then you end up with extra weight, extra components. You're trying to fit things in where they don't belong, and you have a higher center of gravity. And Tesla just said, we're going to build a skateboard. We're going to put the batteries right on the ground and build everything around that battery. So, and then put the motors, right on the axle. And so everything was just designed to be the most efficient possible. And that's, if I had to say one thing about designing anything, it's about making it as efficient as possible. You know that from architecture. You don't put a solar array on a house that is on the north slope.
Mhm.
You got to get it as efficient as possible. Efficient appliances. You've got to do solar water heating, so you're not using any heat. You've got to have all the windows on the south side, so you're gaining all that solar energy in the summer, in the winter, and you put an overhang so you block it in the summer, so you're not overheating. Really simple. Orientation is like 95% of solar design, but nobody gets it. I mean, they put these track houses and they face them every different way, and where most of the windows are, maybe the views on the north side, so all the windows are on the north, and that's not going to work. But so efficiency first, and same thing with vehicles. So getting the batteries in the place where they're needed. So I came up with a patent on exchangeable battery packs.
Mm.
And that was kind of a key, because then there was no range anxiety.
Yep.
You could put the weight where you needed it. And there was several more tractors that I built. In '97, I built one for a Japanese company that was doing humanitarian work, and it was to explode landmines.
Mm.
They were sending these gas tractors out with these rolling chains because the farmland, they couldn't use the farmland because there was these personnel mines all over, or unexploded munitions and stuff, just like there's going to be in Ukraine now. And maybe they'll bring that tractor back. But so I designed an electric one with a 1/2-inch steel battery box and motor box. So because the problem they were having, these gas tractors, when they blow up the landmine, the tractor would be blown up. Yeah.
Mm.
There'd just be a hole through the block or something, would destroy the tractor. So they're ending up with these tractors all scattered over the farmland. And the one I built had a 20-foot boom, because I had so much weight in the batteries, the still lead acid batteries. I could put a 20-foot boom out front with this rolling cylinder with chains coming off of it, and you could explode the landmine and it wouldn't hurt the tractor at all.
Mm.
And
amazing.
I thought, this is it. I'm gonna do this good thing, and so they ordered 4 of them, and I got 2 delivered. And then in '98, the Japanese economy tanked. It was cut in half in '98. and all their humanitarian work stopped. And so I was faced with trying to continue, and I worked with some of the people I'd been working with who wanted to continue it, but we just couldn't come up with the money to keep it going. So that was another dang, economy.
Mm-hmm.
And then I decided, well, I'm going to design a tractor from the ground up. And I got a grant from the U.S. India Science and Technology Fund because I found out that the whole Western Hemisphere was using hydrostatic drives, which were not efficient.
Yep.
And I needed to find geared transmissions. The only place that was still making geared transmission was India for the most part, and China. But the Chinese stuff at the time was not quality, so it didn't last. But India was making really stout tractors, so I went to India and toured 14 different factories, and most of them were still stuck back in the caste system, where the ground floor was the factory workers, dirt floors, sandals, all unair conditioned, unheated, and even the foundries. I went in a foundry in November when I was over there, and it was like 100 degrees in there because they were melting steel or iron to pour into these sand molds that they were forming. And these people were working in sandals, and half naked because it was so hot they couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going, God, to the guy who was giving me the tour, I said, how can these people stand this? And he said, you should see it in the summertime.
Wow.
Yeah, that was his response. Like, oh, these people are, lower caste. This is their job. They do it.
Oh.
And that was like most of the factories were like that still in India. And on the second floor, there's plush carpet, conference rooms, and hand servants walking around behind everyone. And they give you gifts. And if you picked up the gift, they say, oh, no, that's for him to pick up. And he'll carry it out for you. And I'm going, forget this, Finally, I found this company. It was like a college campus, escorts. And so I decided this is it. This is where I'm gonna partner with these guys. And they had already contacted me. That's part of the reason I went to India. The other part was to finish the design of this ground up tractor called the E-Farmer. It was designed after the Alice Chalmers G, which had the engine in the back, and so you could see what you're doing in the front. It had a 3-point hitch in the front, and because it was built back in the late 40s and 50s, and most old farmers say it was the best farm tractor ever built. Because you could work a 40-acre farm with a 10 horsepower gas engine.
Wow.
Because it was just so well designed that it could do all those things. And it had like 20 different attachments, everything you can imagine, but mostly it was a cultivation tractor. It was what they called a tool carrier. And you would sit right behind where the tools were mounted. And so when you were cultivating, you have to see what you're doing, so you get the weeds, not the plants, right? But as soon as they went the Green Revolution, you heard of that?
Yeah.
I call it the toxic revolution, because it's when they switched from compost and cultivation to herbicides, pesticides, and chemical fertilizers.
Mm.
So they no longer needed to see what they were doing. So that was in the late 70s, the Green Revolution, where we can finally grow enough food for all the whole world's population, and we can make them dependent on our grain, and ship it all over the world. And, because fossil fuel made that possible. So I was trying to build a tractor that didn't depend on those new things. Rid of that. And I thought you need to be able to see what you're doing. It needs to have as low a center of gravity as possible. It needs to have probably you need to have the PTO and the rear hitch, because that's what everybody's got, those implements. And you probably want something up front, so you can have a loader or a reaper. Everybody has their mowers in the back now. You know what happens when you run over with 4 wheels? You run over the grass with 4 wheels.
Mm-hmm.
It lays down the grass, and you got the mower in the back, and you mow it, and then grass pops back up. So you usually have to mow a couple times to get a field, and you can't harvest that way. I mean, mowing it in the back means you're running over whatever you're harvesting with 4 wheels,
Yep.
And so back in the old days, the harvesters and the really expensive harvesters, the combines, they all have the harvester in the front, the reaper. And so you could do that with this tractor. So it had a front hitch, a mid hitch, and a rear hitch with a PTO. And you sat, right above the battery pack and the motor. And the motor takes up so little space. I got these pancake motors, which are slower speed, which helped with the whole thing. And a really short transmission, because I didn't need as many gears because it was a lower speed motor. You want to try and duplicate the 2000 RPM if you're using a regular tractor transmission of the diesel engine. They're all made for 2000 RPM. So I had this what I thought was a great design, and then we started developing it. And I went through 4 prototypes and finally got it to where I wanted it. And then I found out at that time that farmers don't have any money. So my whole business model depended on selling these things. And I was, all the organic farmers are using tractors from the 50s and 60s, because those are the ones that you can see what you're doing to cultivate. And they couldn't afford new tractors. Farming's a really hard business. So at that time, I was just forming the corporation in 2012 of Select Track LLC. And then in 2020, I incorporated and became a B Corp. And I was working with escorts, and they didn't have any tractors that had the design that I wanted. And they weren't, the diesel guys just can't comprehend that there's no diesel engine in the front. They just don't think that a tractor, that it's something different. It's not a tractor. So this was like a space frame. I sent pictures of it, but
Yeah.
it's like a space frame with the front and the mid and the rear, and it's got a cab too. It's got a roll bar, roll cage, and cab, so it's really safe. But they couldn't comprehend, so they said, build us. They sent me a tractor that they wanted me to convert. They said, build us a prototype. And so it's the same thing I'd done with the Yanmar with New Holland. I built them a prototype and sent it back to, again, they flew it back to India, and and they took them 2 years. I went back and told them what I had done, but it took them 2 years to develop their own little compact tractor. And that was the model that we started selling, and we're still selling. And we've found that, the vineyards all think they need a 100 horsepower tractor because the stuff they're using is very heavy. And we found if we electrify the implements, we can reduce that tremendously. So that's one of our focuses now. We've taken this vine trimmer that weighs 800 pounds. It uses it's got hydraulic motors. It uses about 25 horsepower. And we put electric motors on it, and it used 3 horsepower. That's how inefficient hydraulics are. And the drivers, when you've got a 25 horsepower hydraulic pump, it's producing so much heat because all that fluid is going, there's friction in all those lines. I don't know if you've ever had a hydraulic hose bust on you when you're operating a machine, but it's literally will burn you because it's so hot. So they have to have a big radiator, and that radiator is blowing heat on the driver as well as the heat from the engine coming back, and so if you're operating in 100-degree temperatures, it adds another 15 or 20 degrees to the temperature. You're up at 120 degrees driving down this tractor, and when we put the electric motors on, there's none of that heat.
Yeah.
Plus, I had built 3 of these 70 horsepower tractors that are out in vineyards through a grant from the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. We got a $500,000 grant, and that's right what I was working on when we finally got some investment. And so we put we converted that thing and put it on the 70 horsepower tractor, and the guys, they're silently going through the field, and you could hear the blades cutting the vines. That's how quiet it was. It was the first time. I mean, usually they have earplugs, ear headphones on, and everything, and it's the heat and the noise and everything was just gone. And so it's like instant born again. Electric. Yeah, I want more of this.
Yeah.
So we're just at the tipping point now, but I'm wanting to miniaturize everything because I can. We built a vine trimmer that's 1/4 the weight, and it only uses 1 horsepower.
Wow.
And so we can mount that vine trimmer on our 25 horsepower tractor and do the same thing as 100 horsepower that costs about $100,000, and the hydraulic vine trimmer that costs $50,000. And we're using string trimmers with blades on them, mounting a bunch of them in the same configuration, does the same cut. I've got videos of it just doing the exact same operation using like 1/20th the horsepower silently. And with 1/4 the weight and 1/10 the cost.
Hmm.
So we're right on the cusp of the just changing the whole vineyard industry, and that's important because Vineyard's brand is dependent on sustainability.
Yeah.
They're already the ones. I put solar up on megawatts of solar up on vineyards back in the 2000s already. And so they're all primed for electric tractors. All I got to do is show them that they don't need those, 5-ton machines that are just compacting their ground into concrete. We can do it with a light machine that's quiet and no pollution, and they're using them for harvest now, but they didn't want to buy them for just one operation. But now with the electric implements, we can have many operations and keep going.
That's great. That's great. Steve, what a ride you've had. We typically like to wrap with a couple rapid fire questions. So I'll kick that off. First being, what's your favorite quote? What's a quote that keeps you going?
Small is beautiful.
Love that.
That's from Fritz Schumacher, a book he wrote in 1970 something. It's my favorite book and my favorite quote.
That's great.
And if you could be any energy transition technology, what would it be and why? Sounds like you've had exposure to lots. So what gets you most excited?
Miniaturizing stuff,
Yeah.
making them more efficient. That's what gets me excited.
That's amazing.
And last, if you could listen, I'm very eager to hear this one because of your breadth of exposure and network and everything. If you could listen to anybody on this podcast, who would it be, and what would you ask them?
Well, Paul McCready, and that's because I've already asked him. But and I'll give you the things that he came. I was the chair of the American Solar Energy Society transportation division. So I was in the great position of being able to invite speakers for 10 years. And during that time, I invited people like Amory Lovins twice, Paul McCready twice, Bob Stimple, the guy who ran GM with the EV1, and Stan Ovshinsky, my boss at ECD, and all kind Ed Begley Jr., all kinds of people. But Paul McCready was I have to say, my favorite. He came to talk about electric vehicles on the first time I had him to the plenary, and he did such a great job. And then he stayed for my presentation on electric tractors. And after he'd watched my presentation afterwards, he said, "I want to come back next year and just give you a few facts." And I said, "Absolutely." Do you know who Paul McCready was?
I don't. Okay, no.
Oh, he is the guy that there was a competition to have a bicycle-powered airplane go across the English Channel and back.
Oh, wow.
And he won that competition, won $1 million. And then the next competition was a solar-powered plane to go across the English Channel and back. And he won that competition, another $1 million. And he started Aero Environment, which built the EV1. And there was some amazing engineers in that company. They built the first controller, regen controller, that was also a battery charger. And the motors, they built their own motors. They did all the stuff you need for And they also did the solar challenge. They won the solar challenge across Australia.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was like my, hero. But he came back the next year, and he had two things that he said that I think everybody should really take to heart going forward. The first was that 150 years ago, 98% of the people worked in the food industry. Only 2% did everything else. And now 2% of the people work in agriculture and 98% do everything else. And he said that's really important because that can't continue, because we all have to be involved with our food so that we can complete those cycles.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing he said was that 150 years ago, 98% of the land mammal life was wild by mass. And today, 2% is wild. And 98% is either human or domesticated. So those, his insights were so powerful those transitions are what is making it really less likely that we're going to survive. Eliminating wildlife and eliminating our connection to the earth, which is agriculture.
Yeah.
I got so many questions. We'll have to get you back, Steve, because I've literally got hundreds of questions on my mind, and I'd love to explore that with you. I do have one more question, actually, though. We're a day before Veterans Day. Is there anyone in your life or that you want to kind of remember or give a shout out to?
Well, my dad died last year. He was a veteran. He retired as deputy director of Caltrans.
Okay.
So you can imagine the arguments at the dinner table. He said, well, we have to build these freeways so that, we can get people back and forth. And I said, by building these freeways, you're allowing sprawl, and there's constant argument all through my whole childhood and adulthood. And, but, towards the end, he started to, I worked one summer at the Community and Environmental Factors Unit in the Division of Highways. And we stopped 3 freeways.
Oh, wow.
Because we would go into the communities and say, do you really want this freeway coming through the middle of your community? And they would turn out in very large numbers. We were instigators for stopping freeways, and we were like in the belly of the beast. It was an amazing thing. I don't know if my dad appreciated that or not, but later in life, I think he started to understand, and when he retired young, because if Bradley would have won as mayor, I think it was back in 1980 or something like that, instead of Duke Majan, he would have been the director of Caltrans. but the Republican governor appointed this director who couldn't handle the job. So they made a special position for my dad, deputy director, and he actually did the job of Caltrans. He started out as an engineer, and he did the largest interchange in the East LA interchange. 5 freeways come together and go past each other, plus a number of major roads.
Oh.
And they had to build a model of it because he drew it up in 3D, but they didn't believe that it would really work. So they had to build a model, and he's still got the model, right? And show you a picture of the model.
It's incredible.
But he is an amazing guy. He retired early because he didn't want to go through the politics of it, of what was going on at the time with a Republican administration. It's rare in California that there's a Republican governor, but it has happened. Reagan and Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
So he retired and he started this organization. It's called the California Transportation Fund, and he started it to help the families of Caltrans workers that were injured or killed on the jobs. And that organization grew over 30. He was the director of it for 30 years. And he just retired when he turned 92 or something as the director, but he stayed on as an advisor and a board member. And when he was bedridden the last year, it was because of the pandemic. He had been going around to all the districts. He knew the heads of all the districts of Caltrans. There's 10 different districts in California. Every year he would make the drive and go to all the districts, and he'd check out the roads and tell them what they should be doing and stuff. In his 90s. And they were trying to get him to come speak at this, to honor him at this convention that they have every year, or the Seafood California Transportation Fund. And I told the director that he couldn't make it. He was bedridden. And so they set up the video channel.
Nice.
So he could see the whole audience, and they could see him, or at least hear him. And it was an amazing moment, because what was so important for me, because we had been talking, all through these years about what I thought needed to happen, and he was stuck mainly in the freeways, that was the solution. And right before this conference, he said, "You know what I want to do is I want to just get up there and I want to introduce you, and I want you to tell them what needs to be done." And that was like, oh my God, my dad has come around, That was the greatest moment.
Special.
But I said, "No, Dad, it's about you. It's not about me." So he was honored, and he got to watch a standing ovation on the screen, and that was his great moment.
Thank you for sharing. It's been an honor getting to spend this time together. Thank you very much for sharing a huge amount of knowledge and experience, and excited to see a lot of electric tractors on farms throughout the world. I think it's the future. Food connection, electrification. So thank you for all you do, and we're definitely excited to get you back.
Thank you, Steve.
All right. Yeah, anytime. And there's stuff I haven't talked about.
We'll line you up. We appreciate you.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Steve.
You guys have a great day. Take care.
Dan, what do you think of that?
Wow, what a legend! When we kicked off Renewable Rides, I didn't quite imagine that we'd talk to somebody that's been on this ride for over 50 years. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, amazing. Definitely super inspiring, isn't it? I love his whole concept of get back to basics, connect with nature, manage, work within the community, and make it more circular, more interactive, less waste, and don't give ourselves the opportunity to be sprawling all over the place.
Yeah, pretty incredible. I would love to think about the conversations over the dinner table between he and his father. That was pretty interesting to learn about there at the end. Yeah, I agree with you. I think just thinking back and relating to myself, the thing that I found most that resonated the most was just his concept of local. I mean, I think about the concept of local energy that Bill Nussey has talked about, and it's right along the lines of everything that we do of distributed and using the energy resources that are available where you're consuming the electricity and the energy. I mean, it makes intuitive sense, and I'm excited to help more people realize the value of it and gain the long-term benefits of these systems.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love his entrepreneurial spirit. He's been at this for a long time, and you can see there's been a lot of headwinds. I feel like momentum is now on his side. A huge amount of opportunity in this space, huge amount of incentives, business pain points, community pain points, and hopefully things turn around and it all starts feeling a bit easier for him.
Yeah, agreed. Well, if there's one thing that we can take away is persistence and sticking with the mission. I think that's probably the biggest takeaway is he saw what his vision and what his mission in life would be, and he has stuck with it through thick and thin, and through triumphs and challenges, and still as passionate as ever about it.
Yeah, ingenuity, innovation, and favorite of all, pedal power. Love it.
Pedal power. Yes, exactly. No, that was amazing. Excited to have him back on soon.
Awesome. Well, happy Veterans Day. Big shout out to all the veterans out there. Thank you for all you gave, and have a wonderful day. Catch you then.
Yeah, take care.
Thanks. See ya. We receive a lot of questions from business leaders around the world wanting to learn more about the energy transition, what is possible, and where to start. So to help you stay informed and up to date on best practices, opportunities, risks, and success stories, we created an industry newsfeed at VECKTA.com/news with all our podcasts, blogs, and newsletter. Check it out and connect with Dan, myself, and the VECKTA team to learn more. Cheers and have a good one.